All right, welcome everybody. We're here at another EvolveLAB Live. I'm extremely excited as I have three of my favorite people, Ames, Daniel, and Ruth. How are you guys doing?
Hey.
Oh yeah, sorry. I have uncontrolled hand gestures.
Get excited. I like it. Cool. All right, so let's start with some intros because I want everyone to kind of know who you guys are, what you guys are about, what you geek out about. And while you guys are doing intros, also everyone that's listening, please chime in the chat window. We want a lot of conversations. While we're doing introductions, can everyone that's listening, please let us know who you guys are, where you're working at in the world. And as you guys have questions, feel free to throw it up in the chat window. So we're going to kick that off. Why don't we start with Ruth, since you're our guest today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing at LS3P?
Sure. Yeah. And I probably should have practiced this or have it canned or, I know there was a press release at some point, but hi, I'm Ruth Parr. I'm with LS3P. I'm an architect. I work on the technology team firm-wide. I'm the strategic BIM manager for all of our projects, all of our offices. And what I do is work to support our visionary efforts with our BIM content, processes, and deliverables.
I love it. That's great. Yeah. Strategic BIM manager. I've heard of BIM manager. I don't know if I've ever heard strategigic BIM manager.
So yeah. It's not an AIA term.
No.
It is custom. It's custom for what I do here at LS3P. And yeah, it's pushing more than just the task at hand, but like shaping the vision of what we're going to do with it and where we're going, which is super cool. And I love it.
Yeah, bigger picture, vision, strategy. That's great. Awesome. Thanks, Ruth. Well, we jump to Daniel. Daniel, who are you? What do you do? What are you about, man?
Who am I? My name's Daniel. I work at EvolveLAB, and I used to be an architect and BIM manager. I guess I still am, but now with EvolveLAB, I've delved more into the app development world. So I work on some Revit add-ins, generative design things for architecture, all sorts of fun stuff. Or I find it fun.
Definitely. Awesome. Crushing it. Recovering architect. I like it. Cool. Ames, what do you do? What are you about?
Yeah. Ames Hart, also with EvolveLAB. Similar to Daniel, I worked very briefly as an architect before kind of moving on to more BIM coordination, BIM management. And during that time is when I started getting into coding. So since I've been at EvolveLAB, I almost strictly code now, especially a lot with the Revit API.
Very cool. Thanks, Ames. Awesome. Well, we're going to kick this off. Ruth, I want to give you the floor. So I've known you now for a few years and known Daryl even longer. So shout out to Daryl if you're on. Daryl is there.
Hey, there he is.
You guys are out there. He's in the chat window. Shout out to Daryl. Good to see you, man. And so Ruth, you and I got introduced through Daryl. And I wanted to give you the floor to kind of talk about kind of why we're here. Like, what were you guys doing at LS3P? We talked about, I think there was this tedious task of views and getting views to align. And I wanted to kind of give you the floor to kind of talk about the problem at hand and kind of why we're here and what we're talking about.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. And, the problem at hand, I think when I was prepping for this, I realized that there's kind of like a super high level problem, and then there's the like smaller level problem. But the high level, like how did we even get to the point where we ran into this problem? One of the things at LS3P we focus on are design excellence, expertise, and innovation. What does that mean in our BIM workflow? We value quality digital craftsmanship. I think anybody else from LS3P on this call has heard me say that at least once a meeting for the past 2 years. So as we, focus on quality digital craftsmanship, we want to build creative workflows. We want to leverage our collective experience and intuition. There are all these big picture ideas that are kind of like, what are we doing as architects? We are all design thinkers. We all have we all have a role in the creative process. And so as it relates to BIM, one of the things we've been talking about is how we can create more space for design and creativity in our projects. So one thing we've been doing is looking for the wasteful parts of our workflow. And that comes into kind of how we get to the small I mean, this is a big problem, but this is how we got to the actual task at hand with view titles. So, we started looking into how we can automate the non-value added parts of our workflow. So anything that feels like it's manual clicks or it's, a barrier to our project team's productivity, we want to get that out of the way for our project teams. And so we've been working with a lot of our partners in the industry. One of them has been Aaron Mahler at Parallax. We've been working with him for the past few years to customize our Revit template so that we can take a lot of these hurdles off the table for our project teams. And so that has been really great. It's also built in a lot of, reliability of our data and geometry. And one of the big things that comes with this new Revit environment is that we are now working in a system that has views already set up, that are already placed on sheets. So when our projects start, they're just drawing within the boxes and their sheets magically appear. And I have a live demo. I'll remember to share my screen.
Okay.
So that's like how we even got to this and where we are in our, in our template environment. Hold on. I did practice this before, just so you guys know. And
we have total faith in you that you'll be able to share your screen.
Listen, anybody also from LS3P on the call knows that I'm really good at live demos. Now, are you seeing what you should be seeing? Yes.
Yep, we see your screen.
Fantastic. Okay, so tons of great things going on in here, and one of the big benefits is, we start our projects and we have all these scope boxes here. We have all of our sheets set up. They've got our notes, our legends, all this great stuff. And when you draw your building, oh, of course I haven't saved my file. When you draw your building, your sheets magically start showing your building. That's fantastic.
It is fantastic.
It's fantastic until your building actually grows and these scope boxes need to move. Because what that does, I forgot to move the building, but what that does is it moves all the views on the sheet. And that's where, you can see here, I moved that scope box, all the views that were already placed on sheets moved, and the view title didn't. And what we found in our process was that there are tools out there that can help you, move these views back to the right spot. You can use Dynamo, you can use external tools, you can click them manually and do this. This is super inefficient, but for the purposes of the demo. But there wasn't anything out there that would let us take the view titles and put them back. And so the big hurdle we found was that we were having to click specifically on a view title in each of these sheets. It wasn't a thing that we could access behind the scenes. And then when we did move it, hopefully they were all moving the same amount, not as consistently as it should have been. But when we moved them, there's only so much you can do with the view title with the fact that they don't snap. We ended up having to get in this nudge situation. And I think nudges in any recommended workflow are like things that make all precision architects cringe along the way. And so that is where we realized that this was just one of those manual, tedious, clerical things. Like we want our sheets to be consistent. We want a consistent graphic standard. This is part of our clear communication of a project. Putting view titles in the exact corner of a sheet does not better your architectural knowledge. It doesn't affect the built environment. This is a thing that our time can be better spent in other ways on projects than nudging view titles into the right spot. And we just noticed that, with all of the efficiency we were gaining in so many other parts of our, our project setup, in any case, regardless of what template environment was started in, if they had scope boxes and they had views on the sheet, and then the project changed and the scope box needed to move, we were stuck in this position where we could get the views back in the right spot, but those view titles were going to be completely in the wrong spot.
And why is that? Why would the view titles? I think we were joking the other day about the song "Never Gonna Get It, Never Gonna Get It." Like they're always off. Just like you zoom in, you zoom out. You're trying to get it in that right spot. Why is that so tedious? Is it because you can't snap it, or they're not tools that already exist that would move that view title in? You mentioned like external tools and Dynamo moving the views. What's the deal with the view titles? How come we can't just have a tool that does that?
So I think in 2022 you can move the view titles, but I don't think there's anything in the view title that gives you like a reference point that you can snap to or use the align. It's just kind of like a couple layers deep, so that our like surface tools like align and like those things, the snaps that are so near and dear to our hearts as architects, are just kind of like hidden beneath the surface for that. Gotcha.
So that's the challenge at hand then. Was there anything else you wanted to show on this side? I wanted to give you full opportunity.
No, I think so. I mean, I think there are about a million things that I want to say about like the idea of quality digital craftsmanship. This definitely, though, has covered all the highlights for, how we got here, like what our vision is behind this, what our focuses are, in terms of the tools we're looking to develop, the processes that we want to take off the table for our project teams, and how impossible. So it seemed like a task that wasn't possible to be done. It was super manual. The research that we did kind of said, you can try, but you probably won't get there. There's not a tool that can touch the view titles. And then especially when Revit 2022 made it more accessible, then it became a thing that didn't want focus, because if you just wait it out, you won't have to deal with it. And for us, we're still working in Revit 2020. We have some projects in 2018. Moving scope boxes happens on new project setups, and it happens on projects that already exist that the building changes after DD. Like this change comes up on projects like throughout the project lifecycle. And so we needed to be able to support it in multiple versions of Revit before the feature was unlocked in the API.
Gotcha. Thanks, Ruth. That's great. Yeah. Great explanation. So then I think we're going to jump to Ames's screen. And while we're doing that, though, I think, Daniel, if I can put you on the spot, like you kind of started this task, and you and Ames are collaborating on it. Can you talk, Daniel, about, like Ruth was saying, like there was research and you could wait till 2022. Can you talk about your research and trying to find a solution for this before Ames jumps in and does the demo?
Yeah, sure. Maybe to tack on a little bit to what Ruth was saying, having worked with LS3P and seen their template from the inside, there's like a lot of advanced pre-set up stuff going on there. Like, it saves a lot of time. Some of these projects that I've seen have hundreds of sheets, so manually moving view titles, like it's not just cosmetic. It seems sometimes they're way off the sheet, but I think when Revit was originally created, maybe it seems like the built-in workflow, they didn't expect you to have sheets and views set up before you make a building. So it seems like this, I don't want to say it wasn't thought about, but this like workflow with this template is kind of funky from their perspective. So with Revit 2022 now, through the API, through Dynamo, there's a way to move view titles directly. But if you Google the forums and stuff before that, Revit 2021, 2018, etc., there's no exposed way to do this. You can't just say view title position equals, etc., which was quite unfortunate. But yeah, you can find like 30 forums out there, and they all end with sometimes someone from Autodesk, sometimes someone from the dev community saying, yeah, there's no way to do this.
Gotcha. Well, why don't we jump in, because I think you guys found a way to do this, which I think is interesting. The team always impresses me. Like, bends the rules of Revit reality, as I say it. It's like you find forums. This isn't the first time where it's like you found something that on a forum that says it's not possible, and then we talked to the team and they found a way to do it. And I'm like, it says it's not possible, and you guys throw some big word around like a recursive algorithm or something like that. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? How did you break the laws of Revit? So somehow you guys got this to work, and I want to see the example here. So Ames, can you kind of walk through the demo, and then maybe we can get into how you guys solve this problem, which is pretty cool. So.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, you can see here that kind of similar to the problem that Ruth was describing, just I've got a set of sheets here that their scope boxes slash the views themselves have been just totally off sheet. You know, this is something you definitely can't print and deliver to somebody. They're not going to be happy. Yeah, so we pretty much built out this app that takes care of not only moving the views, but the big thing that we've been talking about is moving the view titles as well. So yeah, pretty much to show that in action here, can run this. And the first thing you should see is that the views will jump into the right place. And once those are in the right place, the view titles will start to move via Daniel's magic that I think he'll be explaining in a bit.
You can kind of watch this like live if you tile the. That's neat.
And I wanted to put the disclaimer in that, you know, we reached out to EvolveLAB for just purely view title movement. And like all good clients, I increased the scope after seeing how great the view title was, because I said, oh, like, if we're going to do the view titles, like, could you just move the views too? Like, can we just build it all into one? And so what you're seeing today is a, you know, like a next level version of the initial task at hand, which has, you know, only getting it all built into one click is fantastic.
Good comment. Thanks, Ruth.
I'm seeing some comments about fuzzy, maybe we're too zoomed out. Ames, are you able to do it again for maybe one of the sheets full screen or zoomed into the view title? Yeah, just so people can, I don't know, see more clearly what we're doing.
She was at 101A. There you go.
And it should be streaming at 1080, or I think it post-processes at 1080. So if we come back later, it should be a little cleaner. But yeah, zoom in a little bit, Ames, it should be helpful. So hopefully that helps everyone. And sorry if there's a little bit of fuzziness or graininess on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, once that's done running, we've got these view titles placed nicely according to standards, and the views are, depending on whether it's a single or double view, they are arranged as they need to be according to LS3P standards.
Sweet. And this, oh, go ahead, Ruth.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, this is all set up on the idea that the views are already on the sheets. And we did something on the scope box level that totally, like, I think I said yesterday that it unglued things. You know, it blew the sheets up. Just, they were already there, and now you just need to put them back. You're just like tidying up the sheets to go back to where you originally put them.
And I'll just add, someone posted a question about the view title line length, and it actually does control that too. We're going to talk about it in a bit. Oh, options. What are those?
Oh, I thought you had a thing here for the length of the view title, so I was looking for it.
Oh, yeah. And since this is directly tied to the LS3P workflow, so it'll calculate the lengths based on like a lot of presets. So it's not directly controllable. But
so
a lot
that's
of
hard,
things, right? Oh, sorry.
In short then, Daniel, that's hard-coded. So like the view title length then is set for LS3P's view title length standard. Is that what you're communicating?
Yeah, for this
Gotcha.
particular application. But I think, I forget Ames, we can control other things. Like you added the title block options.
Yeah, I think some of this was yours from the moving view titles, and then I think with the views, I needed the grid line spacing, so I introduced that.
So another thing, you know, one of the things that was nice about working with the Evolve team is that there were good questions about, you know, how this interface was going to lay out. You know, what do we need to hard code? What do we need to have a user input for? When we first started this exercise, we were working with, you know, a collection of 60 plus view title, like viewport types within our environment. And so what you're seeing is predominantly on one view title type, but this was an issue that was happening where we had a lot more things where we needed to be able to control the offset of the view title placement differently based on what view title and viewport it was in. So this solution has given us a much more flexible, like the defaults are in there to work so that you don't have to review them if you're working in our defaults. If you're working in our current defaults, this will all get you through. But it is a thing where if you have a one-off or if you're working in another another architect's environment, that you could, figure out those numbers and type it in and be able to use the tool in more than just our hard-coded environment.
Good comment, Ruth. Thanks. The other thing I think is interesting when I first saw this add-in is you have these screenshots, like to kind of tell the end user what's going on here, like where it's getting placed, why it's getting placed, where it's at. Can you guys talk a little bit about the reason and the idea for implementing that? I haven't really seen that in any other kind of like Revit add-ins. It's usually a set of buttons and tabular inputs. And so in here, we actually have some imagery as part of like the user interface. There's some animations that are going on with the checkboxes, which I think are really cool. So like from a UI UX standpoint, there's some interesting functionality going on here, in addition to just like the pragmatic move all of these views and their respective view titles to their respective location. Can you guys talk about the reason and why and how we implemented this?
Yeah, I know, especially for the view title thing, given that there is a lot of magic happening and it was largely dependent on some of these inputs, I think that's where the view title really showing what these various parameters actually are controlling is really important. Like when I was doing the move view stuff, especially according to LS3P standards, the center of the sheet is not like exactly the center of the title block. It's a particular place that's like a column over.
That would be too easy.
Yeah, right. So yeah, we have this like manual input for that, and that's where it'll center the view. And yeah, maybe the view title stuff can speak more to.
Yeah, too easy. Working with LS3P, especially Ruth, they would vigorously test our tool and find lots of bugs. So a lot of back and forth, which I thought was great.
Definitely, yeah.
It went a lot smoother when I actually remembered to send you the files that I had the glitches in.
That's right. It's a little bit of back and forth, which is all good. And then also, like, I see like we have what we usually call quote unquote the gutter, like on the right, where like you have a dedicated amount of real estate for like keynotes and legends. We're not interfacing with that at all, correct? It's simply is it taken in and in, like, how there's a sheet in Revit and then you have a title block and views and legends, et cetera, that go on a quote unquote sheet. So is there any kind of awareness of where the sheet is or where it is in proportion to the title block? I think you were kind of talking about that, Ames, a few seconds ago, but can you guys kind of talk about geographically or from a real estate origin standpoint, how it's placed into views? And it's also not just doing one view, right? It can also do two views simultaneously, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, in the case of the single views, it is, those are largely just dependent on this, like, which one is it? The view options, tell me where the center of it is. I'm going to place it there. But yeah, when you're talking about like these two views, that's when things get a little, fancier, I guess. And it's actually looking at the view title like aspect ratio, and it's comparing that to the size of the grids, the horizontal and vertical grids, which is why we have this input here. Yeah. So depending on the size of that, it's pretty much going to round it, I think, to like the half and the nearest half grid. Round up to the nearest half grid. And yeah, that's how it'll determine how to arrange it, whether it needs to do the views in kind of like a portrait next to each other or stacked horizontally.
Yeah, so there's like a little bit of customization happening. Our default environment, what most of our projects in, is just one plan, one sheet. That's where those scope boxes I showed earlier, we start with up to 9 plans per level of a building. What you're seeing on the screen here is one of our other development efforts to condense it even smaller than one sheet, where we start combining sheets on multiple views on the same sheet, which is something that came up over the course of working on the view title app with you guys was this was a need from our users to be able to condense the sheets a little bit more, which is how we started this conversation about, well, like, I know you just fixed it for one plan on the sheet, but could you do two? And with this, we have, we're still working on the lingo for what this nano project is going to be called, but the like top bottom, like how are your sheets arranged? Is it a RCP on the top and a plan on the bottom, or is it a plan on the left and an RCP on the right? So I've been calling it side by side and top bottom, and people have been getting it. So that's the thing that came up, and we were able to adapt this tool to be able to support this workflow as well, because we're seeing an uptick of projects that need nano size footprints and a bit more condensed sheeting for our projects.
Good comment, Ruth. Thanks. Very cool. All right. I had another question, but I think if you guys want, is there anything else you wanted to? Well, that was what my question was. Is how many views and sheets can this tool process? Is it 10 sheets? Is it 100? Is it unlimited? How long does it take to process a sheet? Can you guys talk about the length of that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as we've found, it's unlimited. I'm sure there's a limit somewhere, but yeah, I mean, I think the unit test model we have, it has almost like 500 sheets in it. But yeah, I'd say moving views is very quick because that's something that the API has accessible. But given the magic, that the hack that Daniel figured out, that's like a 17-step thing that takes a little bit longer. But I think the trade-off is, rather than having to go sheet by sheet and move all this stuff, you just, I don't know, go get a coffee and wait.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say it is definitely faster than even our, we'd automated like finding the sheets, opening them all up, and being able to click, 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 click. Like we'd gotten it as streamlined as we could. This is way faster than the click, click, click ad nauseum. So I haven't done time trials to say, like it's X seconds per sheet on average yet. It does take longer the more sheets you throw into it, understandably.
Yeah, and I think in a bit I can explain why it takes a little bit of extra time. That's one of the cons of this method. But luckily, it's something you could open up a Revit instance and kind of run this in the background on one project and keep doing work, or just get a coffee. Oh,
that's a good comment. Yeah, just open up, run it, open up another session of Revit.
Totally, yeah, automated.
Yeah. Well, why don't we jump into that if you guys want? Daniel, are you able to share your screen and kind of talk about the workaround that you came up with?
Let me give it a try. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
All right, so as we previously mentioned, in Revit 2022 and presumably going forward, there's now an API call to do this, which means through Dynamo or through writing an add-in with code or a few other ways. You can just enter a new position, in a sense, for a view title, and it will move there. But before that, there was no direct way to control where this thing goes. So in this case, and a lot of, like in Alice through P's case, it's not, I used to work at a very large firm, and it's not easy to just switch all your projects to a new version of Revit, especially when sometimes things need to be backwards compatible, work with consultants, lots of families and standards you're using. Like it's a whole, I'm sure lots of BIM managers know this very well. It's a whole process. So that's what got us here. Yeah.
So your point is, even though it's available in 2021 and that's released, a lot of firms might not upgrade to that version for another 2 or 3 years based on concurrent existing projects. So having something to use now. Okay.
Yeah, I've worked on very, very old versions of Revit, relatively, at my old firm. Okay, cool. So essentially, this is like the stage that Ruth gave us the initial problem. We adjusted the scope box, and then the view was off the sheet. It was probably somewhere like, oh man, it's snapping. Somewhere like this. And there are various ways to move the view right back where you want it. But now the view title goes with it, and it's in a weird place. So how we started this is, oh, I don't want to say it, is we noticed that if you delete a viewport, which means delete a view from a sheet, and then bring it back on, you notice that the view title will appear relative to wherever you place the view. Now there's some sort of, I'm going to sketch a little, find that easier to explain. There's some sort of relationship here between where this view title shows up. Let's use some red. And where the corner of the view is, but there's like this offset for the grid lines, the annotation scope, and it's like, what are these dimensions? It's a little bit unclear. So we tried to dig into that a little, and after playing around with this, if I open up this view and say, isolate just the crop box, so now we have nothing else in the view, make sure the annotation crop is turned off. Anything else? And I do this again, take it off the sheet, bring it back onto the sheet. This time I'm just going to stick it somewhere else. We can start to see this sort of somewhat hidden relationship be revealed. You zoom in, like, this point of the view title is perfectly in line with the left edge of the crop box, and there's nothing else there. And there's
if the annotation crop is off, that's the key, right?
That's one of the things. I mean, I isolated the crop box, so literally nothing in the view is visible.
Gotcha.
Just to make sure there's nothing that interferes with it, because the bounds of the viewport, which is a view on a sheet, are different than the bounds of the actual view, if we're getting technical.
Yep.
And then this vertical offset, you can see there's some sort of dimension based on, I don't know, maybe it's the bounding box of this view title family we have in here. So if I take this one step further and actually edit the view title family on my other screen, maybe I will set the view title family type to none, get rid of the extension line, and tell it to not show at all. Just turn off everything. It's gone. Now if I do the same process again, remember the crop box is still isolated in this view. This is the same view. I'm just deleting it, bringing it back, etc. Notice, okay, we have a rectangle. But what Revit actually did is it placed that invisible view title. We just can't see it. But if we go back to it and edit the properties, I'm going to try to turn everything back on how I had it. View title extension line. I think it's the title and scale family. Now look where it is.
Oh, look at that.
So, okay. Sometimes it's invisible. But yeah, so now this sort of insertion point, when we use the empty family, showed up exactly at the bottom left corner of the crop box, when like the view title family and the view were isolated, so you could only see like the crop box essentially. So playing around with this, we're like, if we do this, maybe there's a way to get this to work. So I'm going to undo everything I just did, back to the starting condition. That was like the research experimentation phase. So we were wondering if we could control, the placement of this in that way. So essentially what we want to do is, I'm going to sketch again, capture the distance between where we want the corner of the view to appear and where we want the viewport title to appear. Actually, it's not there. It's there's some fixed relationship, but it's like this point here. So we wanted to get this little distance there. So I'm going to try to do it by hand and see what happens. So if I take this crop box, open up this view, and it should have a scope box applied. Maybe I forgot to put it back on. Normally this view, I want to make sure I'm starting from the right place, has the partial plan A scope box. Yeah, so this is what it should look like. But if I remove the scope box, I'll just hit undo. Now I'm allowed to edit it. Let's say I stretch it. So the bottom left corner is approximately where we want the view title. I'm just going to guesstimate here. Notice I have some funky walls, you'll see, just to know that the crop box is not where it should be. Like for this partial plan. We don't want to see this weird artistic wall, whatever it is. But now, if I do the same thing I did before, you know, isolate just the crop box. And I could change the view title type again. I'm going to be lazy, not do it. But if I remove this from the sheet and bring it back, I can place it relative to where I want that view title. So if I did my math right, it would appear right here. And then if I unisolate the view, I think I might have been using keyboard shortcuts, but I just isolated element when I selected the crop box. Unisolate and switch it back to the correct scope box. Right now it has none. Scope box. Put it back to A. So all these weird walls will disappear. So now the view is exactly where it should be. And the view title is. Actually, it's, you know, it's almost there. We sort of mentioned this earlier, but if you zoom in, you know, you can't ever snap this, which is very annoying. I think Ruth said it best. You just, after you're nudging and zooming in, you turn on thick lines, yell, wait a little bit.
You squint and you take a step back from the screen.
Yeah. So.
And you pretend it's aligned.
But if you actually use the view title tool, which I guess I could do because I have it installed here, same thing, wherever it pops up. We could, that's one of the nice things about the tools. We can get that exact alignment, which you can't ever do by hand. Anyway,
interesting.
So, and one more thing I wanted to mention, because it was in the chat, we actually do control the length of this, the length of the view title extension is based off the length of the crop box, or the length of the whole viewport. So if I do this one more time, turn off my scope box so I can play with it, and say we only want the view title extension to be, I don't know, half the length of the screen, or up to column grid, you know, 2.5, whatever. If I do this, and drag it, delete it, bring it back on the screen one more time, see, we can also, there we go, control the length. And then again, when we, what?
No, go, keep going, I'm interrupting.
Oh, you can interrupt, that's fine. If we put our original scope box back on, see, we have the same exact views on those funky walls, but we have also not only controlled the position, but we've controlled the length. So this app does both of those things based on all those optional inputs you saw at the bottom.
That's incredible. So can you run the app once, Daniel, so we can see it? So all those steps you said that you just did manually, the app does. So it's something like 17 steps of isolating the view, getting everything to line up correctly, takes it off the sheet, drops it on the sheet, and with the appropriate view title, right? Is that, in a sense, the punchline of what's going on?
Essentially, yeah. We broke it down to 17 steps. It started as 4 steps. We kept noticing there's a bunch of nuances that I'm leaving out because I don't want to bore most of the audience.
I advertised it as a nerd fest on LinkedIn, so I mean I was pretty transparent about what was going to happen here.
Well, Ruth can attest. Me and her and some other team members looked through every step of the process so they can really understand what we had done. What sheet is this? A101? I can see what happens. This is a different model, so I'm not 100% sure what's going to happen. We'll try it.
And this is the version that was only doing view titles also.
Yeah, I have an older development build, etc. But why the con of this is it takes a bit of time, because you saw how many times I removed and replaced. Okay, so it works. That's good. I removed and replaced the view on a sheet. And if you've ever set up sheets with larger projects, you'll know that often it takes a bit of time to create a viewport when you place a view on a sheet. So that's the con to this. As we mentioned, the pro is you can control the exact positioning for people like architects who want to be very precise, which is kind of nice. Yeah,
that's great. Very cool.
Any questions? Feel free to shoot them over. Hopefully, I explained it.
Yeah, ask questions, guys, there in the chat. I want to go back to kind of this process, you did this creative approach, Daniel. Like, you were somewhat resilient and persistent, and you and Revit were in a bit of an arm wrestling match. Of Revit said like you couldn't do this, and you kind of kept going down this rabbit hole until you finally found a solution. So good on you for that process. And then Ames came in at the end and wrapped everything up as well. Started working on like the dual views and getting everything implemented. Can you guys talk a little bit about that process? I mean, why did you not just give in? Why not just be like, oh yeah, everything on the forums? Like, how did you?
Oh yeah, well, it was Ruth who's like, hey, can we do this? So
and I said, do it now, Daniel.
I'm one of those people. Sometimes, with certain things, I will find something that says, hey, this cannot be done, and I'll be like, I'm gonna doubt you. I'm gonna try it. But we did like a discovery for I think a day or two, where I just played around to see if it was possible. So we didn't build out the whole 17-step process. We just did enough research to see if, maybe we think that we could do this. And once we showed that to LS3P, they were like, awesome, let's do it. So then it took us some time to, build the actual implementation. But
yeah, and I can say the knockdown dragouts did not come to me. Like I didn't hear about Daniel suffering with the repeated rounds of Revit saying no. It was the demeanor that you see on display here today of, it seems like it's going to be complicated, and I think we found something that's going to work. And then by the end of it, it was just a casual 17-step process that does exactly what you asked it to do.
Yeah, I think if you ask any person, any architect who's worked with Revit, or especially BIM managers, Revit provides so much automation. We're no longer hand drafting, which I like to do, but lots of efficiencies. But I'm sure everyone has run into all these problems that they're like, oh man, why can't Revit do this? And it takes between, a few minutes to a couple hours of Googling and trying different solutions to figure it out. Sometimes there's a way. Other times it's just a popular, oh, hi.
Got the kitty cat. Like it.
Sometimes it's a popular workaround, but yeah, I think anyone in the industry is used to kind of pushing the limitations of Revit to get it to do what you need to do for your projects, for the engineering and the architecture, which is the end goal. The end goal is not to build a model, it's to get the thing built. So
right, totally. Scordex in the comments wanted to ask, isn't it weird that like you can do this in 2022 and you can't do it in older versions? Is that weird to you guys that Autodesk doesn't have this functionality in older versions? And I would equate that even to, Daniel, to the ceiling generator app that you built. Like the ceiling API, like generate ceilings, wasn't available before. Now it is. Can you guys talk about maybe why we have access to certain APIs in newer versions that we don't in older versions, and why that is?
I mean, I have as someone who's dabbled in development, it is much easier, like much less work to provide less backwards compatibility. If you're making a new version and you want it to also be able to translate backwards to everything old that you've updated, and it can just be such a headache, just so much extra work. So that could be one explanation as to why they might not want to go back and add features to older versions. Just keep on improving, just keep on working on the newest one.
Yep. Mark also has a question, and I'm going to try to explain it, Mark, as best I can. Shout out to Mark. Can the title be moved along the X-plane, i.e. like way over to the right for particular view types, i.e. like elevations? So I think the question is like, can you start to get if you have elevations in a view, can you start to align it up also over to the right? Because right now, I think the way you've cracked this, Daniel, is isolating the view and being able to take it off and on. It's basically oriented to the bottom left. What about information on the right? Is that a limitation?
Again, this is an older version, and it was built specifically for LS3P's workflow. But So on the back end, we developed a method to move a view title. And all you need to do to move a view title is provide it with a new starting point, essentially. So what this does is it makes it easy for LS3P to align their views to the bottom left corner of whatever title block they're using, because that's where they need it most. But on the back end, oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that the like elevation section conversation is one that I started thinking about just this morning. In our environment, our pre-sheeted views are all plans and RCPs. And so our focus has been on the horizontal plane. When we get into vertical cuts, that we haven't started talking about that, because for us, there are very few pre-sheeted, those are things that depend on the shape of the building, that are being created within a space, that are highly variable and a lot less easy to predict and pre-sheet for new projects.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to automate it where it's best to automate. So essentially, you can put the title wherever you want. But this, sorry.
Battery running low. Got to plug it in.
Yeah. Oh, you saw that. Yeah. I blame my cat. Anyway, I just ran the tool with a random off. So this is the X offset, and it's built so that it will appear in the same spot by default. But yeah, you could make the view title appear over here if you wanted.
Because the length is hard coded, that would just be something that had to be tweaked for maybe you do the length of the name of the view or something like that.
Yeah. So right now, yeah, exactly. This length is based off the view. So we told it to move it to the right, but we also did not tell it to use a shorter length in this case.
Makes sense. Were you saying something, Ruth? Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Okay, cool. Felipe also mentioned, pretty much you tell Revit to go left and it says you can't go left. So then you got to take 3 rights to get where you want it to go. That's essentially what you did. Is that right, Daniel?
I feel like that sums up a lot of things that we've all done in Revit.
Totally. Ames, was there any big breakthroughs that you had too, as it relates to your efforts, and either things you learned on the project or tasks that, workarounds, or can you talk about like your effort versus Daniel's effort and what you were working on?
Sure, yeah. So, Daniel's focus was moving the view titles, and then I came in a little after and was more focused on actually moving the views themselves first. I feel like I got the longer stick on that one. Easier task, I think. But what I did like about this, and I think Daniel and I have talked a tiny bit about this, is that looking into more of the View API and looking into the Revit API forums and how other people have dealt with like view alignment and stuff. Because that's something that Revit is really bad at, even though, especially in the case of like scope boxes, like theoretically, those should just go right on top of each other. But once you have annotations on it, the way the API works is it's looking at that full viewport, and now they don't align anymore. So some of the like workarounds I found for aligning views are like similar to the stuff that Daniel was doing, actually, where I think Daniel's like isolating the crop box to get rid of the annotation stuff, so you get that simple crop box. Where the way I found was actually like just make it the scope box or your crop box. Turn the scope box off. Make your crop box really big, and then the annotations aren't going to stretch it out anymore. So you can actually just start placing things, without having to worry about the annotation stretching things out. And then kind of same idea as Daniel, you just put the scope box back on it, and everything, looks as it should. So where I'm going is I actually think that the view title moving process, we can probably speed up a bit too, because of what I've kind of learned from moving the view titles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Good comment.
Like each isolation and all that stuff is another transaction, which is Revit having to think and slow down and all that. Where I think if we take some of those transactions out and are doing simpler things that don't require transactions.
Yeah,
it's
I was just going to add, if you've ever been working on Revit and you accidentally click the little light bulb when you didn't want to on a big model, you know, that's like heavy transact. You got to wait 30 seconds, 5 minutes for all the pink lines to show up. We're trying.
Right.
And Ames, you found a way to cut out like a lot of those.
That's great. Speaking of cutting out, I'm at the risk of opening up a big can of worms. I just had a conversation with another one of our clients last Friday. He called me, and we were just talking about the idea of still delivering construction drawings. And, you know, it's the year 2021. And can you guys talk? I mean, there's been a lot of talk in our industry about delivering a model in lieu of construction drawings, and if that's even a possibility. Do you guys have an opinion? And maybe start with you, Ruth, on your opinion and thoughts. Do you think we'll ever get to a point where the model replaces construction documentation? Whereas, as much as you're allowed to say it, where does LS3P stand on like sharing models with contractors and who owns the data? Can you talk at all about that, Ruth, and your opinion on this topic?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't say that I'm an expert on it. There are a lot of other people at our firm that have more detailed nuances of what's happening. But the future is now. It's happening. You know, it's happening whether we mean for it to or not. That's the thing. You know, we are still contractually constrained to a flattened PDF deliverable that takes a lot of the effort we put in on the building information modeling front and just flat, you know, it's just, it doesn't seem like the way of efficiency. It seems like there's a lot of all these extra hurdles about annotations and view titles and sheets and all of that. You know, taking that off the table to focus on the task at hand seems very viable, seems very great, and also opens up a lot of conversations about expectations, liability, the reliability and the consistency of your data, of your geometry. And so, you know, it's prompted a lot of conversations on our end of, you know, what do we rely on in the model? Because we are still contractually giving sheets. And most of the time, if contractors get our models, it's a nice to have. It's not a contractually obligated to have situation. And so we're seeing requests for it more and more often, I think I can say that. And I'll watch the chats in case anybody chimes in on that's not true, but we're seeing requests for it. It is here, you know. Is it default? Is it the most common yet? No. But is it 5 years in the future? No, it's like, it's been happening. It is happening.
Yeah. Go ahead, Daniel.
I agree with Ruth completely. And when I worked at AECOM, which is a very large firm, we did a lot of design build projects, and often the construction documents became much more of a legality, especially with the fast-paced collaboration between contractors and the architects and engineers. We're sending them models every week as they're building. And every, you know, milestone, we send out a set with specs and such, but for the most part, like, we're working with some larger companies out there on the sites with iPads, like, spinning around the model. They don't have the, you know, full-size drawing sets covered in coffee and dirt. So I think eventually it's going to go away. It's starting to. But
the best analogy.
Yeah.
The best analogy I heard, and this is where I kind of land, is that the model doesn't necessarily replace the drawings, but it almost like pairs it with the specs do, like how you have construction documents paired with the specifications paired with your construction documents. And I think there's been a big movement where like Revit was so easy to create an elevation, you drop an elevation, boom, you have a drawing. And so drawings, like once Revit was implemented, the amount of sheets dramatically increased. I think we have like 80% more drawings now than we did before. And so like that amount of drawings needs to temper down a little bit. And we're working on a few projects right now with model deliverables, like a COBE deliverable, Construction Owner Building Information Exchange deliverable. And I don't know, Ames, you gave did a video a few months ago on like a COBE deliverable. And do you have opinion on that, Ames, on what Daniel said, or Ruth, or my comment?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Kobe is even maybe like one example of, this more modern, like model deliverable approach, where, they really are banking on everyone putting in all good data and everything being accurate, and using that to import into facility management stuff. So, yeah, I think, not sure if this is an answer to the question, but I guess to kind of continue the conversation is like, I think one thing I saw, I think it was on LinkedIn even, just by having like a model deliverable and really putting in the time to have a good model, you're showing that you can actually know how to build this. Like I've seen people where, yeah, you're kind of cutting corners, you're modeling stuff in a certain way. Well, it's like, that's not how they're going to build it though. So now you have to do, all this extra detailing and all this other stuff that, maybe if you just modeled it the way it's built, you already have it ready to go.
Yeah. Good comment. Yeah. So there's a slight sidetrack digression on model deliverables, but I was curious on it, especially like as we're talking about moving views and view titles and automation of drawing sets and Revit. I was kind of curious your guys' opinion on that, but it doesn't seem like, at least not in the next short term, like there isn't a reason that we shouldn't continue to pursue tools like this. Would you guys agree? Like the ability to either automatically move, hundreds of views on a sheet, getting them to align correctly, or other efficiencies that could be gained. Do you guys think that there's still reasons to pursue those kind of efficiencies as it relates to drawing sets and construction documentation within Revit?
I think that the more we focus on automating those tasks, the more we build our team's comfort with focusing on the model instead of the sheets.
Good comment. Do you guys have an opinion, Ames or Daniel, on that?
Yeah, I was pretty much thinking the same thing. Just like, clearly some of this stuff isn't going away just yet. But I think we're in this maybe like transition period where, especially now that we can automate all this stuff, that I feel like Ruthie said something like, we didn't go to design school to like figure out how to put the view title here. We're having like designing and modeling and stuff.
Well said.
So,
yeah.
Totally.
Along the lines of this conversation, one of our big campaigns this year has been, that nobody gets excited to talk about the idea of a BIM execution plan. And when we start having these conversations about deliverables and expectations, that is the tool that we have in our arsenal to start those conversations. And that is like one of the most critical parts of this. I get asked pretty often, hey, contractor wants my model, what's our policy? And I was like, what's in your contract? What did you agree on? What are they going to use it for? How, what did you model? And so those are all things that tie in with this, that I think we're still building the infrastructure of having those conversations and documenting those decisions and understanding what it means when a contractor says this, that means our model has to say that. And is that our standard, or is that an additional? Those are all the conversations at hand that I've seen popping up recently.
Yeah, I've had this conversation so many times, and in a nutshell, to say it concisely as you did, Ruth, it comes down to contracts. Like, what are you giving to the contractor? What's the deliverable? Because as architects, it's like, are you being compensated to do this kind of deliverable? And a lot of times it necessitates a kind of Kobe exchange, which takes time, takes labor. So that's a big part of it, is what contractually you're obligated to do. And a big thing too is like, is it like Mark in the chat is talking about risk, risk of sharing the model versus 2D documentation. I won't say which firm I worked for, but I was working at a firm, and the model was correct, but the person doing the drawings, they dimensioned a corridor incorrectly. They dimensioned to a door frame at the end of a corridor instead of the actual corridor itself. And it got passed through the fire marshal, and then it got passed through the contractor. They built it that way, and then someone caught it in the field and ended up having to tear it all the way out and rebuild it. And so the point being was the model was right, but the documents were wrong. Like the construction documents were wrong. And so it's like one of those kind of risk things that you do have to kind of risk the drawing set and the model, which one's correct and what you're having to do. So it's a very interesting conversation, I think, debate happening in our industry. So I was kind of curious your guys' thoughts, especially because like we'll do a post like this and sometimes we'll get criticism of like, well, you're automating all this construction. You shouldn't be talking about documentation. Why are we still doing drawings? Like it should be 100%, a BIM deliverable. you know, and I don't think there's like this right or wrong, like this pendulum, you know, like I feel like a hybrid model and just like we leverage certain tools for a certain task, I think you can leverage certain deliverables for certain things, you know, if that makes sense. So I don't know, that's my thoughts. But I got off my soapbox. Sorry, there's a little bit of a rant there. So cool. Well, guys, thanks so much for showing us. We are top of the hour here. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. Incredible job, Daniel and Ames. Ruth, thanks so much for always putting up with us and for giving us direction. So really appreciate that. And thanks, guys, for taking the time to kind of talk about this process. Thanks to everyone that was listening. Any closing thoughts, words of wisdom that you guys have for anyone? Some inspiring quote?
Oh my goodness. No,
Something
I mean, I was just going to say automate everything. But that's like, it's really hard to.
I'll get behind you on that. Automate everything. That's could become a really catchy tagline. I like it. Cool.
You know, I do like the last couple of comments here from people about like, you know, a big part of this is that people need to learn how to use Revit the right way. And, you know, if you don't have people using it right, then of course you're not going to have a good model. So yeah.
That's tricky because I don't want to start the conversation up again, but that stuff can escape you, you know, like, oh, we have a model and we sent it out and we're building off the model, but we didn't have like drawings to check it. Yeah. Because I think there's some stuff that are done as a drawing, like a detail. You're not going to go model like the screws for every stud. That would be a waste. You just have one detail that shows how that works. Probably not for a stud, but for some, you know.
Yeah, good comment, Daniel. I think if anyone's interested, we had a really good live session called Architects versus Contractors about a month ago. So if anyone's interested, shameless plug to that video. We talked about that exact topic, so I encourage people to check that out. But we are over time. I want to thank everyone for listening on the EvolveLAB live session. Ruth, thanks so much for being a guest. And
thanks for having me.
For sure. We'll talk to you guys soon and have a great day.
Great.